The other night I asked you about a question which was in one of the recent Supreme Court decisions, I thought it was Alito who came out, you seem to think it was Thomas, who came out and said, I really am concerned about the belief that a federal judge thinks that they can determine the course of action for the entire country. In other words, if the president decides, he wants a travel ban from terrorist countries, that a federal judge can come out and knock that down and therefore determine the course of action for the country. The reason why I'm raising that question is if Trump were to come out and declare a national emergency and say, I'm going to have the Army Corps of Engineers build the wall, clearly the Democrats are going to run to something in the Ninth Circus and find a judge who will claim that it's unconstitutional. Yeah. What would happen if Trump said, you have no jurisdiction down here, this is a national issue, not a district issue, and therefore I'm going to ignore your ruling, and the Army Corps of Engineers is going to continue to build, and you will have to wait until a higher court hears the decision, not the country. What would happen in this situation?
Well, Trump's going to lose. The easy answer, Trump will lose. Here's the legal principle is, if a court order comes out, be it an injunction or something else, and it is wrong, and it's clearly wrong, you are obligated under the law to abide by it until it is finally reversed. You have to abide by it. So what will happen is the Ninth Circuit somebody in the Ninth Circuit or Hawaii or somebody will issue one of these things, and unless you can get the Supremes quickly to take the case up, quickly being the operative word, the president can't do it, because what will happen is he will then be in contempt of the court's injunction, and that is going to be grounds for impeachment. That will be grounds for impeachment. Willful failure to abide by a lawful order of the courts that hasn't been reversed. It's not final. It's final until it's heard by the Supreme Court. He's going to lose that argument.
Andrew Jackson did that. He said to Chief Justice Marshall, "You've made a decision. Let's see you enforce it."
Well, yeah.
And he actually called the decision stillborn.
Yeah, it's the old story of how many troops do the justices have? How many troops does the Pope have? There's all sorts of sayings like that because a lot of it relies upon moral authority. I don't think Trump is going to do that. All of his legal advisors are saying, do not do that because you're going to lose this one. You're just going to lose this one. You've got a Democratic House. Sir.
Question, didn't mean to interrupt you,
no.
But I see a very bad tradition, and it's almost getting to the point of being a tradition, of especially those on the left saying, well, we're not going to enforce the laws. Obviously, DACA is a form of that. DOMA, where the U.S. Attorney General of the United States said, I'm not going to protect that law. We see that happening a lot at the state level, where people decide, I'm not going to enforce it. In fact, I'll argue against the law, even though I am not a legislator. I am a law enforcement person. It's getting worse. I have a long-running post on Granite Rock. The title of it being Progressives in the Proper Role of Government and Your Subservience to It. As an example, because I think your topic is appropriate for some of these quotes. New Hampshire State Representative Chris Roberts, or at least at the time he was a rep, Democrat. Government has to protect us from our own stupidity. New Hampshire State Rep. Lee Webb, the role of government is to legislate behavior. New Hampshire State Rep. Laura Pantic-Lakos, I don't care about protecting people's liberty. New Hampshire State Rep. John Mann, liberty is either an ideology or a gross misrepresentation and oversimplification, accidental or otherwise, of what government is for. Yet, that's kind of why it exists if you read the Declaration of Independence in the beginning. Let's see. Next one. New Hampshire State Rep. Cynthia Chase, concerning the Free State Project. What we can do is to make the environment here so unwelcoming that some will choose not to come and some may actually leave. One way is to pass measures that will restrict freedoms that they think they will find here. New Hampshire State Rep. Deborah D. Simone, Republican. the Constitution is a guideline. New Hampshire State Rep. Sandra Keynes, I don't try to justify anything by the Constitution. It's not my job, and I don't want to do it. New Hampshire State Rep. Susan Mercer Vale, one rarely considered consequence of the Free State Project will be the, well, no, never mind, that doesn't apply. New Hampshire State Rep. Susan Almy, well, you don't get to decide what is constitutional, and I don't get to decide what's constitutional. The judiciary decides what is constitutional. And we can continue on and on and on.
Yeah.
The reason why I read those is that most of your discussion here tonight is premised on the idea that the Constitution is our foundational law and should be obeyed, especially in the topic that I kind of took you off of. How many divisions does the justices have?
Yeah, how many troops? How many soldiers?
When you get to the point where the lawmakers no longer represent the Constitution, either the New Hampshire or the US one, as foundational law, they've now unmoored themselves from the idea of a limited government. They can do anything that they want. So I find it a little bit strange in your discussion, to which I agree with, but your premise seems to be that, well, everybody obeys the Constitution.
No,
everybody is obeying the law, and I just wanted to point out there are a lot that don't.
There are a lot that
don't. The question is
Yeah.
what happens to our society when nobody wants to enforce or believe in anything?
Well, was it Franklin that said we have we don't have a democracy, we have a republic if we can keep it? The preamble of the Constitution, form or perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. The remedy for that is for people who do believe in the Constitution to promulgate and publicize these kinds of statements and to throw them out. We have elections every 2 years. We have the ability to throw all the bums out. And I think it's a great idea. People say, oh man, we should have 4-year terms or 6-year terms or whatever. 2-year terms are fine. It's worked for us for hundreds of years. Who cares? We can throw the bums out when they vote bad. I mean, they're people who claim to be Republicans and they're not. They ought to be voted. They ought to be primary. They ought to be voted out of office. That's our remedy. That's our remedy. We have to speak up. We have to publicize those kind of statements the way you do in the Granite Rock and in other things. I'm not a member of the Free State Project, but I've been to some of their events, and I'm going to some more of their events. I'm not a member of the Tea Party, but I've been to some of their events, and I've spoken at some of their events. But you've got to speak out. You can't just say, it's not my job, or as they say in Miami, not my job. It's not my job. It's everybody's job. It's everybody's job. This is what people have bled and died for. This is what we got all these people with they're maimed and injured and amputees and everything else floating around from different wars all over the country. And for what? To protect us, to protect our way of life. And if we lose sight of that, we're in big trouble. And when we elect we elect people who say things like that, they ought to be run out of office. Of course, they ought to be tarred and feathered too, but they ought to be run out of office. But some of the stuff is unbelievable.
Do these idiots know that the New Hampshire Constitution allows for revolution? There's actually a specific clause in
Some
there.
of them do understand that Article 10 exists. Most of them don't care.
Well, the other thing is I saw an interesting thing in the Sun. I love the Sun, and we have somebody from the Sun here, and which is good. The Sun is great because they have this open letters policy, and they don't limit you to 250 words like the union leader does, and they, you get a lot of back and forth. And recently, in the last day or two, there was some letter, they talked about jury nullification. Anybody know what jury nullification is? Jury nullification is when, in a criminal case, the prosecution has proven the facts. They've proven every element that the defendant has committed, every element of the crime. The jury has been instructed, this is the law, if you find this and this and this, you shall find the defendant guilty. And the jury goes back to their room, they consider it, and they come back and they say, not guilty. Because they don't think that in the circumstances of a case, that it's fair and just to convict. Jury nullification goes back to the earliest part of our country. And now, last biennium, we actually passed a law that allows the court to instruct the jurors that their determination of stands, that basically codifies in New Hampshire statutes the right to jury nullification. So, okay, the other thing is about why some of this stuff doesn't get prosecuted. Prosecutors who are in the executive branch of the government are vested with what's called prosecutorial discretion. And they have the right to, prosecutors under the code of ethics that govern all lawyers are supposed to seek justice, not convictions. But if you ask any prosecutor, what's their win-loss percentage? They know exactly to the 10th decimal place, exactly how many they won and how many they lost. So they're gonna go and they're gonna take the cases that they think they're gonna win. And if a case is shaky, even though they should prosecute, they won't. Just in closing, I just want to say that people said to me, how could you vote for Trump? And I voted for Trump. He was not my first choice. I voted for Governor Sununu, wasn't my first choice. I was backing Edelman in the governor's race. Came close. Good for horseshoes and hand grenades. I said that if Hillary was running against a turnip, I would have voted for the turnip. If Hillary had been and made the appointments, instead of Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, you would have Loretta Lynch and Eric Holder.
Yes.
Can you imagine what the court would be like then?
What the country would be like.
Or what the country would be like then. So, thank you for your attention. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Not enough people, but I'm glad you came. Thank you for braving the vortex.
Crop TV.